Hey, what up? I am Alistair. I run the very small business of Gnome Gnite Minis. I make very small, characterful resin miniatures out of my house. And to put things very simply, I'm an idiot and I got struck by the Dunning-Kruger effect because I made one set of half-decent looking chainmail out of green stuff and decided that I could mold, sculpt, and cast my own miniatures. This was a mistake. And you perhaps have also been struck by this mistake and have hit one of the many hurdles that get in between you and your ideas about what you want to make and actually producing that thing as a physical object. Now we're going to avoid these hurdles not by actually learning how to do an armature, not by actually learning how to use the materials that have time limits like green stuff and milliput. No, we're going to cheat. Cheat number one. Armatures. Now, for the sake of argument, let's say I want to do a miniature in a very heroic pose with an arm up here, fist, one hand on his hip, body, legs. This is, garbage drawing. Let's say I want to do, this man looks like Disco Stew. Let's say I want to do a Disco Stew miniature. I need to know, before I even put the first bit of clay, green stuff, whatever, that this is the pose that I'm going for. And when you first start out, having like a really heavy idea, I find it difficult to work with. Like, I've got to know exactly where to put my wire that goes like this, here, 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 and then a little bit for the head. So I've got to do that with wire before I even start. Now the issue is, this is going to sound very wanky, but when you're first starting out with sculpture, it's a very discovery-oriented process, in that the medium that you're working with is talking to you as much as you're talking to it. And then I'm also setting myself up for failure later on with my casting. This arm is going to catch bubbles all the time because it's thin and pokes out above the head. I kind of need thickness. So we're going to avoid that with our first cheat. I'm not thinking about armature wire. I am going to use a paper clip. And I am going to straighten out this paper clip. Normally I would use pliers, but I don't know, you might not have pliers. And one, straightened paper clip can be my first sculpting tool if I don't have any. But secondly, this can form the beginnings of an armature. So I'm literally just going to find halfway through my paper clip. I'm going to fold him in half, give him a little pinch. I'm going to find just off the head, fold him up on that point. And I'm going to fold down. This is my armature. This is my shape. I'm going to put that in a cork. That's going to be what I'm going to sculpt with. Now, what have I done with this cheat? This is now the shape that my miniature is going to be. And this helps me in that this is also going to be a castable shape. Because we're going to be working... We're not going to make a heroic pose. We're going to make a blob. And the reason we're making a blob is because we're getting ahead of problems down the line with sculpting, molding, and casting, in that we're going to be using this shape to avoid catching any bubbles. So, let's imagine that this is our mold box. Here at the bottom of our mold box is our little blob shape. Currently, there's no places in between the top of the blob and the bottom of the blob that are going to catch air. Because we're actually going to be doing this upside down. Hold on. There we go. Resin's going to go in and needs to go out at the same time. Now let's say I put an arm out here. This arm, both of these arms are going to need to be sprued. Or vented. So I'm going to pour resin in here. Air is going to escape out these spots and fill in there. Hopefully, one can imagine. Now, the thinner these are, and the higher they are, let's say I put a little Witcher Geralt sword on his back, this is also going to need a sprue or a vent. In fact, what I'd do is I'd probably vent it around like this. If I don't vent that, surface tension is going to stop my resin from running all the way down into here, and that's going to screw me up. So, by working with just our simple blob silhouette, comme ça, we're going to avoid bubbles. Now, the other issue we're going to have is big details. Let's say if I'm doing a goblin, and I give him a big nose. Now, here is going to want to catch bubbles. So what I need to do is I need to smooth out that transition to allow bubbles places to escape. Also, when I'm pouring it, I'm probably going to pour at an angle so that the resin can actually get in to his little bubbly nose. We're going to come back to that later. So I've got my overall shape, I've got my silhouette, I've got my armature in inverted commas. What we're going to be working with now is our next cheat is materials. Now, we're not going to be working with green stuff or milliput because that, one, they're expensive, and that limited time that they both have in terms of curing and the changes in behavior that they have while they're curing can get in the way of you making something. I know every time I try and sculpt a head in green stuff, I get very frustrated because as I make changes on one side of the green stuff, it spreads over to the other side. What we're going to be working with is polymer clay. Polymer clay is great. If you can find stuff that is the right consistency, it can take detail very well. It remains firm enough that your sculpting in on one side isn't going to affect the sculpting on the other, so long as you have an armature for it to stand on. And you can save your work. If at any point you're happy with what you've got, but you want to add further detail on top, you just take it away, bake it, and then add more polymer clay on top. Now, our next cheat after that is tools. I only use 3, pretty much. I have some others that I've made, but I have this, which is a nail art dot tool for $3 and whatever cents from a dollar store, which has 2 small ball bearings on the end of needles. I have this, which is a blackhead tool, which again, $3. I use the needle end, I don't really use the other end. And I have this, which is a nail cuticle pusher. And what we're doing is we're avoiding paying the hobby tax. Because if I got these in a sculpting tool pack, I'd end up paying more. And I'd also end up with a bunch of tools that I don't necessarily want to use. Now, this guy can be replaced by the back of a stainless steel fork. This guy can be replaced by a sewing needle. And then this one, again, the other end of a sewing needle is a ball. And you can work with that. So let's get started. If ever I say anything important, I'll slow it down, but otherwise this will be sort of speed, time-lapsed up to speed. So what I think I'll be making is a medieval beekeeper. So currently I'm just glomming things on. I've skipped legs. There we are. It's another thing which we need to work in. What am I going to try and make as a beginner who cannot sculpt? Is I'm going to not be trying to make a Perry Miniatures historical miniature. I'm going to be working on making a weird little freak. And as usual, things are going to look a bit penisy to start with. It's just kind of the nature of sculpting. You always start out with a penis, and then you work from there. Alright, so we've hit the time-lapse time, and here I am sort of bulking out the shoulders. So what I've got in mind is, again, as I said, sort of a medieval beekeeper. Those guys are in sort of a big hood that covers their shoulders, and then sort of robes all the way to the floor. And there's 2 on Instagram that play spooky music in their weird beekeeper outfits. One of them's a bagpipe player and the other one plays drums. And so I was working on that. What I'm doing here with the ball tool is I'm smoothing out all the transitions between layers of stuff, just sort of roughing those up so that when I go back over with the bigger tool, with the spatula, it'll smooth over and make sort of a smooth transition between points. Because I don't want any rando wrinkles, I want my wrinkles to be somewhat deliberate. Here I am, bulking out the shoulders even more. making them nice and big, because you've got to fit some arms under there. Alright, what do we got here? Peeling off another piece. This will probably be, yep, shawl sort of thing, which I'm joining in the middle. Again, just sort of pinching off a piece and then pinching it flat, and then making the hood here. As you can see, this looks a bit rough in terms of the hood, so I'm going to use the ball tool to smoosh in the face nice and flat, make sure there's a nice separation between it and the hood, and then play with the shape of the edges and corners of the hood. Dividing down the middle there, as you will see in sort of those medieval hoods, and then here I come with the big flat tool to make everything nice and smooth to start working on. When I'm doing this, I'm making sure that I'm not just smooshing the shoulders all the way flat. I'm deliberately going at them from on top to even things out. And here I come back with the ball tool, mucking with the edges of the hood, sort of smoothing out that transition between the two pieces of polymer clay until it becomes one piece. And here I am putting in the new division between the hood and the shoulders and the line down the middle. So that is sort of our actual piece here now. Where I've got the hood where I want the shape of it. I can play with that a little bit. I'm going to come back through, keep smoothing, because I've just got lots of little wrinkles from putting blobs of clay onto here. Looking at it now, I'm going to add sort of a long tail. If you look at some of those medieval hoods, they have a very long tail down the back, which looks fun, and I thought would be an interesting little detail, so I've added that in here. Here I'm actually detailing and everything all just with the ball tool, and then coming back at it with the smaller one to make the lines more defined. Coming back, smoothing, and repeatedly just smoothing things out with the spatula tool. I'm using the rounder edge here because I found it gave me a nicer shape. You can see me sort of ironing and then putting the shoulders back in. And then flipping it around and patting it with the other side. Now for that sort of cloth, it's sort of a very heavy wool, so you wouldn't get lots of individualized wrinkles with it. It's a big shape, whereas I'm imagining the lower one is a linen or something else that will take the wind a bit more. Now, why have I gone away? Aha! So, I have two goes at creating an instrument here. My first idea is that I'm going to do a set of bagpipes. So I'm laying out toothpicks as my sort of pipes going in, out, and around. Coming back with the ball tool, and so I realized that I've got to put the face in. So what I'm doing here is I'm building up sort of spirals with the point of the needle tool, and then scratching in lines to the middle, and then putting the spirals back on top to look like weaved, basket weaving, which is what those medieval beekeepers had. And I've laid down what I think is going to be the start of my bagpipe. I realize that my pipes are going to be too thick if I do them out of toothpicks, so I get rid of those and I go and get some. Here's one I prepared earlier. Go and get some wire from another paper clip. Put that all in. So there's the pipes coming out of the top, and I grab myself a glob of clay to act as the bag, and another piece to act as the chanter down the bottom. And I stick in 2 globs of clay to act as arms. And you'll see after I get the second glob of clay in there to act as the second arm that I realize that the whole thing looks kind of dog shit, and I'm not sure I'm going to be able to put it into place. So here I am using the end of the spatula tool to lift up the corner of the robe, so it looks like it's sort of falling over the top of the arm in a natural way. And I start smoothing things out, and I realize that my arms, like, he has to have one extremely long noodle arm in order for this thing to work, and it's going to look like garbage. And I immediately decide that it is a terrible idea, and I'm just going to peel it all off and go for a drum instead. So get rid of all of that. Goodbye, bagpipes. And coming back through to smooth everything out with my thumb.
So if I can't do bagpipes, I suppose I will do a drum instead. So I lever out that piece of the side of the hood to make myself a little tube, which I then flatten the ends of. That'll be our drum underneath his arm. Get another piece of polymer clay here. Just a little blob to act as an arm. Smooth out my earlier area of destruction where I removed the bagpipe. Coming back through, smoothing, taking it out of view for whatever reason. Smoothing out the ends of the drum. And there we are, we've got a drumstick. We've got a little blob to act as an arm. So I'm going to introduce another blob as a hand, I believe. Yes, there. Make sure that it's separate from the hood. Just playing with the shape. And again, this is, you know, what I was talking about earlier, where when you're sculpting and you're not fully experienced in the ability to produce exactly what you're thinking of, you've got to talk to the material, and the material talks back. So the materials were telling me, we don't want to be bagpipes today. And so I've pivoted there and gone, alright, well, we can use something else, we can make a drum. Here I am, putting a separation between the sleeve and the hand. And then working on sort of sculpting out a fist shape. So we've got one hand going over one thumb going over the stick, and then the remaining fingers going underneath it. I think I've zoomed in here, and then I'm laying in an arm to go all the way around the drumstick. Unfortunately, I've taken it out of view. In this area that I'm mucking with. I realized that the shoulder's not bulky enough to act like there's an arm coming out of there, so I put another piece on top, which I will smooth out the transition again with the ball tool. Sort of, rather than just one slab looking a bit weird, I make it a smoother blob. And I'm annoyed that I did this out of view, but I did, so that's unfortunate. But here you can see me scraping the edges to make the transition between the blobs of clay smooth. Well, no, extra rough so that they can then be smooth. Whereas if I try and smooth it out straight away, I'm going to put like lines in, which I don't necessarily want. By don't necessarily want, I mean I actively do not want. And sometimes you can see me flipping it upside down. That's due to the fact that I am left-handed. And so, great camera work here. When I want to do things on that particular side of the model on that particular angle, I'll need to flip the whole thing upside down. Which is nice that it's all attached to the cork. I can recommend sculpting on top of a cork and or something similar. Alright, here we go. Working on the hands. So I'm just teasing out the shape and then introducing lines between fingers. I think these guys only have 2 or 3 fingers. One thumb, multiple fingers. Alright, scraping out the edges of the hood again, just teasing the shape. Here we are, smoothing out the arm, making it a bit more arm-shaped, using the thin end of the ball tool to create the separation between the sleeve and the hand. This hand needs a thumb, so you can see me teasing out the thumb there, and then adding in some fingers. Alright, just using the... So, what we can demonstrate there is the use of using your larger tools and then working your way down, or sometimes you can start with your little tools and work your way up. So I use the big tool to create the separation between the fingers, and I'm using this little needle tool to draw that separation even sharper. To smooth things out. Alright, here I am redoing the face again, because I've obviously smoothed it out, so you can see me actually drawing in the lines and then recircling again to create that sort of wicker effect. Coming back through, smoothing out some lumps with the big spatula that I've since created. I'm even creating lumps. I'm creating the sort of the drag lines of the fabric. Realizing that I've got to get at it from another angle. Smoothing out the sleeve to make it look a bit more fabric-y. Then going back through with the ball tool to make sure that any areas of separation that I've lumped over get rethinged. And here I am creating sort of wind lines in the bottom of the robes. Now these are all going in the one direction, so we're going to imagine that our wind is coming across, if we're looking at the face of the model, from his right hand to his left hand, from the drum playing hand to the drum holding hand. That's where the wind is sort of dragging his robes around. I start doing those with the back of the blackhead tool, and then I find that I'm not happy with the result. And then here I am introducing some sort of fabric texture into the heavier wooden cowl, just scratching in some hatch marks. I'm doing that very lightly because I don't... If you go too heavily with a sharp tool on polymer clay, well, on most sculpting mediums, you'll tear and create little flakes and drags, whereas if you stay with a light touch and then go back over it several times, you will result in a nice smooth thing. You can see a couple of tears in there, which aren't not super fussed about. And then here I am putting stitching around the end of the drum skin and drawing in lines and sort of wood texture for boards. Again, with the pointy tool, because it's a small detail, requires the pointiness. Alright, I've gone and grabbed a sewing pin, and so I'm using that to drag the lines into the bottom of the robes, because I thought that the big ball on the end of that would create nice things. Creating more cross-hatching there, making that hood look a bit more disheveled, and then making the drag lines at the back of the hood look even more pronounced. Again, when you're sculpting, you want big chunky details, you want overly exaggerated details because it's going to be at tabletop distance. You want to be able to look at it instantly and see what it is, rather than, I find some guys who sculpt, particularly in 3D sculpts, they're very focused on creating sort of an artistic piece in terms of what they're creating, rather than thinking about something that has to be printed and then played with. Here I am introducing some extra blobs of polymer clay to smooth out the transitions between areas of the model. I don't want to have my silicone seep into there and then require either being ripped out and then risking damaging further details on the mold, or trapping air in there. So what I've done is created a lump between the stick and the drum head there that I've sort of smoothed out, so you can't necessarily see it from straight on in front, but does create it all as one solid object rather than separate pieces.
So yeah, all mate's done. Cooked him for 20 minutes in the oven just to set all the polymer clay. This little bit where his drum goes into next to his body, I did my best to smooth that out with some extra polymer clay. But we still got a little bit of an undercut there, so I am a little bit worried that we'll catch bubbles, but we'll see how we go. I'm going to clip him and then build a little mold box as we talk. Where did I put my little snips? They're over here. So yeah, just to make life easy with molding and casting, I'm just going to do a single piece cut mold. Right, piece of paperclip went somewhere. There's another one. So there we are. Clip the little bits off. Get me some cardboard. Some tape. And some hot glue. Tape. And hot glue's coming. Alright. So yeah, mold boxes, don't go too complicated. What I use is some 40 milliliter paper shot glasses that you can get from your average common or garden store. Yeah. These fellas. And here's one I prepared earlier, the man already inside. But what I do, this guy, get some packing tape. Oops. Usually just need one piece. Put it on a piece of cardboard. This is from a item purchased from the old Kmart. Cut a hole in the top of this. Actually, why am I doing it this way? We'll film it the other way. Alright, filming from this side.
Alright, so I'm just cutting the hole in the top of my little paper shot cup here. Most of my miniatures, I try and sculpt them so that they will fit inside either a paper cup of this size or a larger paper cup, because that way I don't have to think about building a mold box. And I've got some hot glue here, which I'm just letting warm up. So what I'll be doing, other guys use sort of glue dots, double-sided tape, super glue, whatever else, to attach things in their mold boxes. I know Robert Talone uses wax and hates hot glue, but hot glue, easy. My hot glue gun cost $7 and I got it 6-ish years ago, still works. So we are dollop hot glue on that, and then a nice thick bead of hot glue all the way around the bottom of the cup in order to create a nice, not necessarily watertight, but silicone tight seal.
Here we are, now it's time for the satisfying question mark silicone pour. What I'm currently using is this, which is Solid Solutions Platinum Pure Silicone. Other people have their recommendations and whatever. This is just the store that is in Sydney that I can, go to and not spend extra money on postage. And it was on sale. Stuff that I first used was called Pinky Seal. You can get that from Barnes in Melbourne. The thing about that was it had like 3-minute working time and then set up after 20 minutes, half an hour. And that was pretty good for just getting something straight away. This stuff's a little bit goopier than that, which is fine. It's a little oopy goopy. My thoughts is, especially when you're starting out, I'm willing to trade a little bit of, final product for speed and ease of use, and that's why I would honestly recommend the Pinky Seal, because you'll have a miniature by the end of the day if you use that, which is nice. Whereas this stuff, like, I've started pretty early, but by the end of today I'll also have a miniature cast. Now, am I gonna go and put this in a vacuum chamber and then a pressure pot afterwards? No, because I'm not gonna ask you, person who doesn't know how to sculpt, mold, or cast yet, to go and spend hundreds and hundreds of dollars on that item of specialist equipment when you don't even know if you like this as an idea. It's also why I suggest the Pinky Seal, because you can just get like a 500 milliliter package thereof, which is like 4 or 5 individual molds. That's pretty good to figure out whether or not you like this part of the hobby. Whereas if I tell you to go and get a gallon's worth of whatever, I don't know what it's called, smooth on whatever, and you pay however much plus however much in postage, that's a ridiculous thing to ask of a person who just wants to start out in something. This is all about DIYing and just doing enough to figure out whether or not you like doing this. It isn't about producing perfect molds and perfect casts every time. If it was about perfection, I'd tell you to go buy a 3D printer and learn to 3D sculpt. I believe that's an easier way to produce a multitude of items comparatively quickly, and I think it will take less time. This is merely about physically doing it, and about whether or not you want to do it. Why have I got the sniffles all of a sudden? I guess I just do. Well, let's hope that they don't come up too much. So yeah, just basic silicone. Don't bother with the pressure pot. Don't bother with the vacuum chamber. Just make sure you stir it properly. Don't worry about silicone stirring sticks. Just as long as you stir nice and smoothly. Don't whip it. Make sure you're stirring around and in figure eights rather than going from bottom to top and introducing extra bubbles. Like, you'll see me do that a little bit just to get some extra stirring going and so I don't waste any of this stuff, because silicone is expensive. Alright, now I've got to scrape all this gunk out of here. My working time with this stuff's actually nice and high. It's 20 something minutes. So this isn't too bad in terms of making sure I get it all used. Just drizzled a little bit. Also hope I'm in shot, but my head's probably coming out. I'm gonna hurt my back. Anyway, look, it's there's lots of ways to overthink this whole thing. So in chasing perfect casts and perfect whatevers, you don't need to do that. You can just good enough's good enough, especially to start out. And I think that is the problem, not necessarily the problem, but an issue that I've had with a lot of other people's sculpting tutorials and molding and casting tutorials is they're like, yeah, you know, save 40 cents, save yourself $4 by recasting this Warhammer miniature by spending $400 on equipment. We're not doing that. There's a reason why I have my cheap tools and I use polymer clay that I got from Kmart rather than, you know, the name brand polymer clay. It's because I'm cheap and I like to do things myself. And I'm sure at some point when I was a young lad, my dad said, I'm not going to spend that. I can buy the tools to make it for less. And then he doomed me to a life of half-finished projects and, you know, more tools than I'll ever use. Anyway, alright, I'll try and stir in camera. What I'm doing here is a figure of 8, and I'm going to stir until this is uniform. Make sure to stir your silicone correctly, otherwise you'll end up with it not curing because it needs to have the old chemical reaction. Why am I, given that I'm a big fan of do-it-yourself and avoiding paying the hobby tax on anything, why am I using like proper molding and casting silicone rather than going and getting some like bathroom silicone? Now I have actually tried that. I noticed there was a Craftsman video where he used corn flour to make a silicone putty that he used to, I can't remember what he molded and cast, but he did something with it. It's great. It is possible. It's not easy. And the issue with finding like 100% pure silicone and whatever was I'd be paying just as much as I would for this, for just a little tube, which I didn't want to do. I can't really cast something like this with a push mold. And then thinning, I did try and thin it. There's a guy out there that uses a bunch of different chemicals to try and thin like caulking silicone. And I did that and it wouldn't cure. Because I think it needs to be exposed to air and the moisture in the air in order to cure. And then what I used to thin it was turpentine, and then that was preventing the deeper parts from getting any fluids into them. And so it just like, I left this shit for like a week after I poured it, and it thinned quite well, it just wouldn't cure. So as much as I avoid paying the hobby tax on everything else, actually spend the money on silicone. Alright, hopefully that's enough. Hopefully I've mixed up enough, and I think we're stirred. There's definitely introduced a few bubbles, but we're going to do our best to make sure we pour it nice from on a decent height. Scrape the edges, make sure we're not missing out on any of the hardener or the silicone. And then when we're pouring, we're going to pour from a decent height. We're going to start the pour off to the side of our molds. And then we're going to lift it up and have it drizzle up and over everything. Alright, here we go. Grouping the silicone. So a nice thin stream. And I bet you I haven't mixed up enough. I bet you I'm gonna have to mix up a smaller batch for the second one. But that's life. I could probably go a bit higher. Honestly, not 100% happy with the second B-man. I just draped him a little bit, that's no good. He'd be right. Could have done a slightly better job, that's okay. Still pretty good. And just saying the letter P moved my silicone stream away from where it's supposed to be pouring. But like I said, I wanted to get it done in an hour. This is kind of just about getting it done. You yourself can take more time to do these things. Big fan of starting something in a day and then not having it sit on the work in progress shelf for weeks and weeks at a time. Finishing something within a day is a much nicer feeling. Especially when it comes to crafty things. That's why I choose the materials that I've chosen, why I choose the silicone that I choose, why I chose to use a particular polyurethane, although honestly it's a little bit quick, but we'll talk about that when it's time to pour that. Alright, hopefully that's enough for you. That's enough, and then this one. So here's one I prepared earlier. Just drizzled a little bit on my table. That's alright, silicone will come off when it cures. Now let's see whether or not we made enough for our second one. I bet you we haven't got enough. I'm gonna get like 3/4 of the way. Which makes no sense because it's 2 things. If I use 2 shot cups, I should be able to pour 2 shot cups worth of resin. Not resin, silicone. But there you go. Be like that sometimes. Do I have any chunkies? Not really. I'll have a look and see what I've got. So I do have some small offcuts from previous molds that I'll be able to introduce to maybe rise up this last little bit of silicone, or I'll just mix up just a tiny little batch just to top it up, because the working time is long enough. When you're using Pinky Sil, like if you haven't mixed up enough, just pour it, let it cure, and then do another pour on top. Now I do have access to a pressure pot, because my girlfriend used to make / currently makes dice. She runs the Sibylline Dice small business and Instagram and whatever else. And you can have a look at those. But I'm going to avoid using it for these, because I want you to see what you can produce just with the basic tools at your disposal, without fishing out, what, $300 for specialist equipment. Oh boy, oh, we're so close. Let's just do a scrape and see what we can get. Which of course will introduce more bubbles, but we're most of the way over the head currently. Ooh, I don't think that's going to be enough. What you lose on the inside of the cup, I suppose. Yep. Pretty much all bubble. Yeah, we're not going to get there. We're so close. Like, just the teeny tiniest little bit. How very frustrating.
Alright, so here I am introducing just small offcuts from previous molds, just trimming around the edges and putting them in there to take up some volume, because silicone will stick to silicone. Don't have footage of it in this video, but you can see some of my molds. They've got even mixed varieties thereof. See just mysterious cubes. I realize I haven't gotten enough, so I've gone and got some more molds to see if I can trim off some more and edit. You can see the scissors working at the corner of the screen there. Alright, introducing more chunks. Because all I need to do is raise it about 2-3 millimeters above his head. But I realize that regardless of how I go, regardless of how much I'm trimming, I'm still just going to need that little bit of extra silicone to get over the top of the hood and the head there. But yeah, if you just leave the silicone on top, it's not going to... you're going to end up with a weirdly shaped mold, so you've got to poke them down into the actual volume of the silicone. But here I am, just very quickly whipping up, just scraping every last little drop, every tiny little drop of silicone I can get out of the cup. But there is simply inadequate amounts. And I have never not once in my life have I mixed up unless I'm doing one mold, I just barely ever mix up the right amount of silicone. I always require just that little tiny bit more, or I've got just a little bit left over. And that's just life. Perhaps if I was... Well, because even if I know the volumes that I require, and still you lose a little bit to the inside of the cup, Each cup that you use to mix up silicon, you're gonna, like, it's best to try and mix it all in one, or at minimum two. If you're mixing from 2 cups into one thing, you lose a bit of volume in both. Whereas, if you just mix up in one of those graduated measuring cups, you don't lose any volume. Then again, you got to be very cognizant of scraping the edges to make sure that you don't accidentally leave behind some. But hopefully, we'll be introducing just the final few mils to actually rise up the last little bit and cover up his head. So I'm going to leave those to cure. And here I have come back a couple hours later. So I've lined up the edge of the mold, the edge of the model, and I'm putting sort of a little zigzag down the side here. So I want as straight a cut as possible next to the model, and then a zigzag further out, in order to like allow the mold to lock back into itself, so you don't get any sort of slip, and you minimize your mold lines. I learned that technique from Robert Toulon's videos. If you want to mold and cast things, I can't recommend watching his stuff enough. It's really good. This is his job, molding and casting things, so he's very production focused. He's not really willing to make the DIY sort of sacrifices for cheapness or overall technique. Which one was this one? This was the original one. This is the guy without the drum, but you'll see him pop out. There we go. And then the other one is the one with the drum. So again, finding the through line of the model. Just cutting in just a little, just enough that you can fish the model out. Don't need to go too hard with it. It can be quite difficult to cut silicon if you're not spreading and stretching it, whereas if you're stretching it, you can just touch it with the end of a sharp knife and it will separate quite easily. Here I am trying to see which side the drum's on. So I've found the drum. So I know I need to cut further on this side, because if I try and pull it out now, I risk tearing the mold. So I just need to get just above the edge of the drum, and it should pop out quite happily. Comme ça. Alright, more speedy, and we're just gonna mix up some polyurethane here. So I use Solid Solutions 660 polyurethane. Honestly, the cure time and the working time are too short. I can't get this into a pressure pot in enough time. And I've got up there my third mold, which I use sort of any overpours, any trash goes in that, and I make my big trash man. And you can see me just opening up the mold and rocking and rolling it a little bit to make sure that I get no trapped air in any of the details. Just rocking and rolling and then giving everything a bit of a shake and a squeeze, and then dumping the rest into the overpour mold. And again, giving him a little squeeze and a rock and a roll to get around all the little bits of trash. And then we will have a very speedy bit of footage of the final little bits curing. And you can see the white introduced there because the polyurethane cures white. So it will change color as it cures until it becomes nice and solid. That is, of course, like 16 times speed. I believe it takes about 10 minutes. And here we are. I'll just peel them out. And you can see some small bubbles, because, again, curing without a pressure pot. But as something that I have produced with my bare hands, that's pretty great.
So, it's a couple of days later. Cast a few more times. Did a little drawing. Made a little bit of packaging for them. Gnome Gunite. And there you go. So, that is how to mold, sculpt, and cast when you don't know how to mold, sculpt, and cast by cheating. Just thinking about this, you got to make enough trash before you make anything good. I think that is an overlooked part of any hobby, is just the amount of garbage that you got to make before you're actually producing anything decent. But the hope is, by using the cheats that I have given you, you can jump ahead to making something complete, successful, a complete make, rather than wallowing in, getting things half done. That's that one. I'm probably gonna do a couple more of these. I don't know what about. Maybe, adding armatures or adding sprues or that sort of thing while keeping it to the overall blob silhouette. But I hope you've enjoyed. Watch it and learn something. One thing that I did forget was, and it's been coming up a little bit recently. Hello, cat. Where are you going? Is you should clean your... So after you've cooked your models in the oven, you should give them a clean with isopropyl alcohol, because I'm not sure if you can see it, but there was a little bit of cure inhibition in some of the cracks on this guy, on the silicon, and then the last couple of molds I've done have had a little bit of that too. So I think I've got to cook them for a little bit longer, and I've got to clean them with isopropyl alcohol afterwards. However, you can get that from wherever. You can just get rubbing alcohol, the 60 whatever % stuff, and that'll do the job as well, or metho or whatever else. Thanks very much for tuning in, everybody. I shall see you all at some point in the future for some more Gnome Gunite minis.
Hey, cat. Cat. It's a